thank you again so much, Jason, for having that very interesting conversation with Graham. I think that it has sparked a lot of interest among all of us who have just watched that and just heard what you have to say. And there's just no doubt that cryptocurrency is becoming more and more of an element that we have to consider. It's not a bubble, it's growing. And the more one dives into it and actually does research and starts looking at those big numbers, the more exciting it becomes for businesses, but also daunting because it's new, it's different. We're not too sure how the market landscape will evolve in the future, given this new development. But I think that the one industry that is slightly more concerned than others is the traditional financial banking service providers, because, at a glance, it feels like cryptocurrency is currently busy creating its real-time replacement. As we watch it grow, which is very concerning. And I think the rate of change that we're seeing in crypto, just in the space of 5 years, how quickly it went from being, a free piece of software to a currency that was valued equally to gold, is really quite striking and slightly terrifying for businesses that are slower to change and slightly slower to adapt and more traditional in that sense.
Yeah.
So what we have found, though, looking at both of these industries being crypto or DeFi and traditional banks, is that they do have a surprising shared pain point that we wouldn't have necessarily thought of before, which is the fact that they are both inherently based upon and built on trust. And they're both in a position right now where they're lacking trust to a certain extent. What is really exciting, though, and presents quite a large window of opportunity for banks, is that they currently have the upper hand. They have the trust infrastructure, or the trust foundation, should we call it, from being in operation for so many years. They are run by local authorities. We understand how they work. Our parents, perhaps, who have guided us in terms of entering the world of finance, they've used banks. And so it is a natural transition for most people. Whereas when it comes to crypto, there is still so much to learn, so much uncertainty, and crypto needs trust on a global scale to work, whereas certain banks maybe need a more localized element to survive, depending on where they're based. And so essentially, if banks can build up their trust systems now while crypto is trying to catch up globally, there is a big opportunity to not only maintain their service offerings, but also to expand into the crypto space, carrying their trust foundations with them. So it is a very interesting space that they find themselves in. However, as we discussed just quite recently with Graham, building trust is not a simple thing. And it is an element that has been largely overlooked, especially in the virtual world, as we've moved into the digital space. Right now, as you mentioned before, we have star ratings, for example. And if you want to be making big investment decisions or trying to understand where is best to put your money, a 5-star rating just won't cut it. And we've been having many conversations with you that have just been so inspiring from this standpoint. And we wanted to really just discuss that with you today, because, there could be certain clients that are reading this article or watching these videos and they're completely on board. But then the big question comes into the actual how. So if we were on board with this, if we wanted to build more trust infrastructure, if we wanted to advance into the space, what are the practicalities around doing that? And within this discussion, I just wanted to address 5 key aspects that banks can start looking at, and then I'll start talking and you can jump in. But just to reiterate this from the article, we want to look at how, if companies work with Utu, how they can maintain basically their authority and their trust within their industry, how they could potentially even expand their business offering, with these trust infrastructures, how they could basically do market expansion, and how we can even make trust part of marketing and communications and just build these foundations more and more. So with that being said, do you want to give us a quick overview from an Utu standpoint in terms of how we can actually get this done, and the tools and services available to us?
Sure. Thanks for the great intro, and really happy to be back talking with you, especially on the topic of digital trust, and especially within the financial sector, because this is a huge area or place where trust just falls short, and there's a lot more that can be done to unlock better value propositions, that drive better outcomes for businesses in the financial space, as well as for consumers and end users. So you talked about like, how do we maintain consumer trust in financial services? And so I would point to something commonly called to the trust equation, which is basically saying that trust equals credibility plus reliability plus intimacy, all divided by self-orientation. So you probably have a sense of what these things mean, and you're probably evaluating right now, okay, how do I feel about the financial sector? Probably they have some amount of credibility that comes from regulations and authorities that have certified them or vetted their business practices, audited them, regulated them. So there's some amount of credibility that comes from a centralized source that you may or may not believe in, which will affect your credibility view of the institution. There's reliability, which is about how they've served you in the past and how they've lived up to commitments that they've made, which again, depending on the institution, may be higher or lower. And then there's an area where I think a lot of banks and other companies really fall short, which is around intimacy and then self-orientation. So intimacy is really about how well the customer feels like you know them and how well you actually know them and how you're able to demonstrate this. And this is something that Utu specializes in. I'll talk about in just a second. And then the last one is this denominator of self-orientation. So does the user end up feeling like you're acting on their behalf, or you're acting in your own self-interests or referencing back to yourself? And so Utu really has an impact on these last two in major ways. So in the intimacy bit, intimacy comes from being known, from instead of what you might call similarity, what we would call familiarity. How close are we? Who's the information coming from? Not just what is the information that I'm being given, but who's the source of that information? And is it being communicated to me in a way that's meaningful for me, in a mode that's meaningful, and is the content meaningful? And this is where Utu's understanding of social relationships and social networks and how people fit together with each other, not just in similarity, but also in familiarity, allows us to help you engage with a user, with a customer in that sort of intimate way, referencing the right data from the right folks. So the last bit that I mentioned was self-orientation. Again, this comes back to, does the user feel like their best interests are what you're acting on? And this might come from how you handle data and privacy issues and putting the user in control of those things with really granular tools that empower the users. Will every user probably go deep into these things? Likely not, but knowing that that control is there builds a lot of trust and limits that self-orientation. And if you notice the role that it plays in the trust equation, it's a really important factor because all three other factors are divided by it. Just some basic examples, but Utu really functions on this idea of transparency, of data privacy for end users, and that they are the ones whose data we're talking about and should be in control of it, and how we actually put them in control of that data to further their own objectives as they relate to financial services. And I think what you find is that those objectives align at some point between the user and the service provider.
And can I ask a quick question? So basically, Utu also collects new data, even though consumers still have access to the control of that data. You're still collecting that data as you roll out these various tools and services.
Yeah, so we try to collect as much data as we can about different pieces of the transaction, about context, about the user, about their relationships. But we do this always with the user privacy as the core concern or the chief concern. In our view of the world, privacy and data are human rights, and these belong to users. Our goal is to collect data on behalf of users and give them the tools that let them take control of it and put it in their service of their own objectives. So you can think of our business model more as building rails for users to take power over their data rather than profiting off of users' data.
I see. And then one more question on that. So you have this data coming in and you see how people are obviously engaging with these different sort of services or tools or data points, whatever it may be for the particular campaign or client, then can you basically measure the trust scales? And if trust is ramping up or if trust levels are improving, are you able to measure those sort of sentiments given the equation that you just spoke about?
Yeah, there's lots of ways that you can measure trust in terms of business outcomes, actually, right? If we look at trust and the role that it plays in easing transactional friction, better trust is reflected in higher conversion rates, in higher customer satisfaction rates, higher referral rates as people want to share something really great with the people that are close to them. In all of the key metrics that most businesses are tracking, customer acquisition costs, things like this, those can all be measurably improved by better trust. And there's lots of interesting research that we've led as Utu to empirically understand things like the effect of trust on user preferences compared to star ratings, where they really outperform star ratings, a user or a service that is recommended by a friend but has a low star rating versus a service that is highly star rated but has no recommendation from someone that's known to the end user. There's a huge difference in conversion rates in these two cases. So there's, depending on the business and the unique context in which they would want to deploy Utu as part of their sales process, as part of their marketing, as part of their conversion flow, or maybe even just gathering really granular, better feedback in more nuanced forms that are more relatable to be shared and used in other areas of the business, whether that's moving from star ratings to, say, video reviews in the 21st century when we're carrying around our phone. And it's a lot easier to hold your phone up and record a video about your thoughts on a product or service than it is to maybe type out a long narrative with your thumbs.
I see. Brilliant. So if a bank were to do this, if they were to deploy this within the processes and the systems tomorrow, what would you to recommend maybe the 2 or 3 things that they would start doing with the tools that you have available today?
Yeah, if we take the example of a bank, you can use trust to expand and build on current banking services, like I said, by capturing better feedback in the beginning from your users and then leveraging that feedback in different ways to drive your business metrics. There's also this idea of creating a culture of inclusiveness by moving to trust scoring or adding trust scoring on top of credit scoring, because credit scoring is by its nature historical, but not everybody has a history. And so when we move to trust scoring as a means of evaluation for financial services, for evaluating risk and potential, there's just a much wider pool of people that can be considered in a model that evaluates trust in a more holistic way than just financial histories. You can also they can also tap into client social networks to drive their business with targeted recommendations and identification of best clients and top performing segments of users, and then trying to identify from social networks the users that are familiar to those users and for whom these value propositions could be very strong and they could be easily reached with the feedback content that you've already gathered from your existing users. So there's just a couple examples.
Great, thank you. So basically, it can come all the way through from your planning processes. So looking at what metrics you're busy monitoring, looking at those different metrics in the context of the trust equation, then looking at your actual business systems in terms of how it's busy, being plugged in at that point, looking at your campaigns and seeing how we can start connecting consumers in more innovative ways with this as the core foundation of the planning process and of that campaign.
Exactly. Yeah, it's really about identifying what are the bottlenecks in your funnel as a business, converting leads into revenue, and trying to understand which of those choke points are being affected by trust, and inserting that trust that's needed directly at the place or the conversion point where a lot of business is falling off.
I see. And just maybe elaborate a little bit more on something that really caught my attention, which was looking at trust scores. Because I would imagine if banks are moving into the crypto space, a lot of people that are using cryptocurrency, they don't necessarily have the historical data as they would normally have for a credit rating. So this could be a way that banks could also move over towards the crypto space, innovate in that sense. And I know that we also spoke a while ago about like to coins and creating coins of their own as banks. Could you perhaps elaborate on that a little bit, a bit more about what you're doing as Utu space? Because you're busy making that shift right now as we speak.
Sure. I think one of the things to keep in mind when we talk about the opportunities that are created with cryptocurrency and tokens is the ability to solve problems with economic models as much as computer science has allowed us to solve problems with technical solutions, right? So not everything is a technical problem and requires a technical solution. Many problems are problems of incentives and finding the right construction of incentives to reward stakeholders for the role that they play in an ecosystem. And if we think about the role that user data plays in making a transaction frictionless, we recognize that data has huge value, and that value should accrue to the user. And so banks can easily adapt to this trend by starting to reward their users with tokens for different things that the users are already doing that create additional value props for the user. This is something like Utu has done, right? Utu is tokenizing trust. So all of the transactions, all of the data that is generated as a user transacts on this platform, on that platform, on this marketplace or this other marketplace, all of that data can be leveraged in the future by the user to create better outcomes for themselves and for their networks. And that data also has an economic value that can be represented in tokens. There's lots of new value propositions that can be created. And again, coming back to this discussion of where banks and the current financial sector excels and some of the gaps in the DeFi sector and decentralized finance, and how these two players can come together, these two sides of financial services can come together, leveraging their strengths, where banks have credibility and reliability in many cases that DeFi platforms really lack, and DeFi platforms might have better trust in terms of transparency and self-orientation. And so there's really opportunities to fill each other's weaknesses and create combined value propositions that are greater than the sum of what either side can offer on their own.
When it comes to something like the Utu points, for example, is that something that Utu is open to collaborating with other institutions on, or is that something that other institutions will have to create on their own?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We created UtuCoin to be a decentralized infrastructure for the entire internet and for the next internet, right? If we think about Web 1.0 as a web of information or an information economy, and Web 2.0 as a platform economy, and Web 3.0, which is coming as a token economy that allows us not just to read as in Web 1.0 or read and write as in Web 2.0, but to read, write, and execute natively on the internet and have a trust infrastructure that is built with that sort of native functionality in mind and available to any platform that wants to integrate it. This is a really key factor for us because right now, trust has not been provided by an infrastructure service. It's mostly provided by the entity itself. As an infrastructure provider of trust, though, we're able to be a trusted, honest broker, which is something that every institution who's seeking better trust with their users can lean on our role as an honest broker to demonstrate their commitment to transparency, to data privacy, and to rewarding their users for the data that actually is generated. What's nice for those companies is that those rewards don't come from your balance sheet or your treasury. This is part of the Utu model and it's built in. So it's almost like Utu is providing extra rewards to your users for doing what they were already doing.
I see. So it's just, yeah, it's an added value proposition for both sides. And I think, this is coming at a very interesting time as well, because a lot of banks are currently shifting to becoming completely online, for example. So if you were to get in and do these things and implement these different tests and change infrastructure, like now would be the perfect time to do it. So I know that well, it's very fascinating listening to you speak, and I think a lot of people, again, are super interested by what we've just discussed, but it does still seem a little bit abstract. But the good news is that as we agreed recently, we'll be piloting this with one of our clients in real life, a bank specifically. So for anyone who does want to see how this is going to come to life, case studies of how it's being implemented and just seeing it on the ground, we'll be doing that quite soon, which is very, very exciting. So Jason, thank you so much for your time. I'm not sure if there's any last words that you want to add, any last sentiments, but this has been really insightful, and I can't wait to see this come to life with one of our clients very shortly.
Thanks so much, Roxanne. I really appreciate dentsu's interest in Utu and your vision that you guys continue to represent, forward-looking vision on where the internet is going and how companies can stay ahead. Utu's goal in many ways is to help companies bridge from Internet 2.0 to Web 3.0, right? So we apply for both equally as valid. We can serve both types of clients equally as valid, but we also critically serve as this bridge for existing companies that are already playing in the main economy, the centralized economy, to get footholds and not miss out on the opportunity that's being created in the decentralized economy.
Completely. The opportunity is just too massive to
Absolutely.
let it pass by. Great. But thank you so much, Jason. I really appreciate it. And I really look forward to our next interview where we tell everyone the amazing results from our case study. So thank you very much.
Looking forward to it. Thanks so much.
Ciao.
Cheers.